Here we go. Recording in progress. So, some of you might remember me banging on about the Pfizer trials for pregnant women. There was a big fanfare. They're, doing this trial with 4,000 women and it's going to be amazing. Okay, great. So they announced that, and they said when the study would be completed. So I went and looked for the study, and it wasn't there. So there's a note saying it's not yet being published, and then it pointed you to somewhere else. You go to that other place and you search through, and eventually it tells you the results have not been published. Okay, fine. And then went back 6 months later, and the results still hadn't been published. I was like, okay. And then went back a year later. Now, by this time, the COVID vaccine had been deemed that it was safe for pregnant women. My question was, how are you saying it's safe for pregnant women when they haven't released the data on the trial? And the reason I'm coming back to this one, number one, I think it's important, but number two, there's the Yale study that's come out, and if you have a look and just put, Yale COVID vaccine injury study, first thing you're going to see two words probably that keep popping up: rare. I'm not quite sure how many times things have to happen before they're no longer deemed to be rare. But, myocarditis, pericarditis, Guillain-Barré, shingles, blood clots, it's like, oh, come on, how many more? Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. But also the fact that it's a small study by Yale, and it was a small study, it was 42 people. But then I was curious, I was like, okay, how many people? Because I know the 4,000 women did not take part. It dwindled to about 500. So I thought, let me go and see now, coming, 5 years after all of this kicked off, let me see if I can finally find the data. Because I looked 2.5 years after, 3 years later, could not find the results of the study. I'm now on the National Library of Medicine, PubMed Central, and voila, it is here. This was published on the 5th of October 2024. So that's pushing up to 4 years after this was given to pregnant women, which I find interesting. Anyway, so we kind of come and have a little bit of a read down here. A cross-sectional study targeted 438 women. I would say, given that they were administering this to millions of women and giving out billions with a B, billions of doses, I actually think 438 is a relatively small number. Yeah, I don't see anyone talking about the small study done with pregnant women. Granted, it's more than 42, but I would say in the grand scheme of things, where you are injecting millions of pregnant women, normally pregnant women don't eat cheese, don't smell aromatherapy oils, don't do this, don't do that. And you're injecting them with something that actually hadn't been through any kind of clinical trial that had released the results. I actually think that's a little bit strange. Anyway, so we've got the cross-sectional study of 438 women, most participants age 25 to less than 35. Very nice. So 61% were university graduates. So no statistically significant differences in the groups studied regarding demographics. Wonderful. However, women in Group B had a significantly higher rate of abortions, 24.4%. I'm not a statistician. I'm not a scientist. But I actually think 24.4% is quite a high number. Anyway, let's continue. Abnormal placentas, size and location, 103 women, 42.7%. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a statistician. However, would those of you watching this agree with me that 42% is high? Now, if you are a pregnant woman who took this drug, you're injected, you had the MNRA, have you been told about these numbers? Were they discussed with you? Put a yes or no. I don't need to get into a big old discussion about it. Yes, I was told. No, I was not told. Yes, I knew about this. No, I didn't know about this. Let us continue. Let us continue. So, abnormal fetal growth, 122, 53.7%. I think that's a high number. Problems with breastfeeding, blood pressure problems, and more cases of malaise, headaches, chest pains, breathing problems, and sleep problems. I mean, what is this? Conclusion. The COVID-19 vaccine significantly reduces post-vaccination COVID-19, although COVID-19 vaccine-related AES adverse events are prevalent. Although we can give you some more drugs, some analgesics to effectively treat most of them. Keywords, da 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 da. Plain language summary. Let's get plain language. Prevalence and issues of COVID-19 vaccine adverse events among pregnant women. I'm looking at this line right here. Plain language summary. I'm going to read it again just for people who are sitting at the back. Prevalence and issues of COVID-19 vaccine adverse events among pregnant women. Please, pregnant women who got the COVID-19 vaccine or who are still being told, and no, I won't even say the word. Let's just say told, because the things I've heard, it kind of felt more like coercion. And when somebody says no jab, no job, that's kind of a big deal. And that's not necessarily how I would frame up informed consent. So if you are a pregnant woman, have you been told about the numbers I have just read to you? That's basically all I want to say right now. I'm going to leave it there. My name is Marilyn Devonish, the Neuro Success Coach. I'm wearing this t-shirt for a different reason, but it says, expect the unexpected. I expected those results to be bad because, hold on a minute, keeps doing the funny thing. I expected those results to be bad because when all of this was announced in 2020, number one, it just didn't sound right to me. I'm like, there's something not right with this. Where has this all come from? Out of the blue so fast, etc., etc. Now, I did ask a chief medical officer about that. He explained that some of the vectors and things had already existed, so it's just a case of almost like a little bit like he didn't say Meccano, but in my brain, a little bit like Meccano. You've got all of the pieces. So I'm showing me age, aren't I? Lego. And you've got all the pieces, so you just put them together. I was like, okay, this is interesting. You got all the pieces, so that means this existed before. So I then went and did some research, and I found the old mNRA studies because it has existed before. 1980s, it's been around, it's been floating around a while. I read those studies and I nearly fell off my chair. Good job, it's a nice ergonomic design. What did I find? I found that a good 50%, we're seeing the similar numbers now with this study. They're not saying it's a small study, so let's just say the study on pregnant women. A good 50% of those animals, because it was animal testing first time round, didn't make it, or they developed these awful cancerous growths and all these awful, horrible things that happened to them. So they put them out of their misery, as one would. But you know what was really interesting about those studies? That was fascinating to me, and it was fascinating and chilling. And I'm going to pause for a moment. If you happen to be watching this video, let me give you a second. Put in the chat, what do you think happened to the surviving lab rats and animals that they were testing on? I'm going to count to 5 in my head. I'm going to give you a chance to type your comments into the chat. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment. What happened to the remaining test subjects, lab rats, animals, is they killed them. Now you might go, oh, well, what was interesting to me is if you are doing this study, you've already seen that a large proportion, now we're calling it turbo cancer. That term wasn't around when I was reading these studies. I was reading this in early 2020 once I'd heard that term mNRA. So I thought, well, let me just go and research this. Now, of course, I was thinking, well, it's going to be available. I'm sure people will be able to decide if they want it or not, but I would just be interested to know what it is and what we can expect from this. The reason I thought, well, that's a bit odd that you're going to kill the remaining test subjects is now you don't have any long-term data. I think that's kind of odd because surely if you see that happening pretty quickly to the test subjects who immediately reacted to the mNRA, surely if you're a scientist and the others seem to be okay, so they weren't putting them out of their misery because they had these great big tumors and stuff. They're just putting, they were fine on the face of it. I'd be like, well, surely now I want to study the remaining, let's call them lab rats, for actually a long period of time because I want to see if what happened to the others is going to happen to them, but maybe not as quickly. It's going to progress over a period of time. So the reason I had said in 2020 and in 2021 that I thought we were going to see the first big wave of vaccine injuries 12 to 18 months after vaccination was because reading these studies. I then also said, some of you might have been in those meetings where I said these words and people got very upset with me, that I expected in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see this progression with what we now, I guess we call it excess deaths. However, when you get to that kind of time scale, no one will be putting two and two together and making four. It's going to be one of those things, sudden illness, runs in the family, even though nobody else in the family has had it. And even now, when somebody basically drops down dead in the vaccine center, they're still explaining it away. And I remember speaking to a coroner, this was in 2021, and they saw a series of people coming through their place of work. When you go through that place of work as a client, you're basically dead with no what they call no comorbidity. So there was nothing wrong with them, and many of them were young, they were fit, they were healthy, no prior illnesses, but they all had one thing in common. 8 of them definitively had one thing in common, and the remaining 2 said it was likely and probable that they also had that thing in common. And the way the way they had classified those deaths, they said they died of SADS, sudden adult death syndrome. My response was, you're stating the blinking obvious. It's obviously died suddenly. I don't think anybody's questioning that. But what lies beneath the what was the cause of their sudden death? We know they died suddenly and they were an adult. That is not a cause of death for me. That is a description of what happened, the outcome, but that's not the cause. So I will add the link to this study, pmc.ncbi.n alpha lima m for mother.nih.gov/article/PMC 114571991. That's a bit of a mouthful. I will add it in the description wherever I've posted this video, if the video stays up long, because actually the climate has changed somewhat. I'm seeing more people being able to share stories of their loved ones who have died as a result of the vaccine. We see stories coming out. There's one particular newspaper, I'm not quite sure what's going on. Suddenly in the last 2-3 weeks, they've pretty much published a vaccine injury story every day. I'm like, what's going on? Because previously it was like a taboo subject. So the tide is turning and changing a bit, but I just found finally the results of this interesting. When I raised this a couple of years ago, my God, it was like a rugby scrum pylon when I was simply asking the question. There was also, while we're on the subject of neonatal and postnatal, etc., there was a study with a hospital in Scotland. And whereas the death rate previously would have been 2 to 5 infants, it was 21 and 22. That's actually quite significant. Again, we're into kind of these big numbers. You know what their response was? They were not going to ask the mothers if they were vaccinated because they didn't want to add further distress. Now, number one, you and I both know that in 2021, 2022, 2023, which is when this started happening, after the rollout of you know what? Some people call it the Maxine, but but after that rollout, this is when this started happening. I'm like, number one, you couldn't even walk into a poxy little bar. I don't drink, but I'm aware that because they were getting young people by saying if you don't have your vaccine, COVID vaccine pass and da 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 da, you're not getting into nightclubs, etc. So you couldn't even go into a poxy little bar. No offense to the poxy bars. I'm sure they're all lovely, but you couldn't even go into a little bar without some stranger asking you for proof of vaccination status. So are you really trying to tell me that you've got women in hospital giving birth and you do not know what their vaccine status is at the time where there were mandates? You've got to be kidding me. And I keep saying they must think we're stupid, but I've had to go, well, clearly they do, and maybe people are, because even when you say these things and it makes absolutely no sense, there are people defending them to the hilt. So, for the mothers and mothers to be, please let me know in the comments, were you told about these numbers? Were you told about that very long list? Were you told about the problems with the placenta? Were you told about the spontaneous abortions? Let me know. I really want to know. And if you don't want to comment publicly, send me a DM. Because I'm assuming now that this is sitting right here in pretty much black and white, that you have all had informed consent. And I would like to think that those of you who were vaccinated in 2021 and 2022 and 2023 and 2024 were told about the potential risks to your health and to the health of your unborn child. I really genuinely want to know the answer to that question, given that I've been pursuing this data for quite a long time. Anyway, I'm gonna leave that here. Thank you so much for watching. And I really do hope that we can have an adult conversation about it. This is not the time for the I really hope, I mean, I know it's not over, but the name calling, tinfoil hat wearing, conspiracy theories, yada yada, and even now, even that's coming full circle, because that term conspiracy theorist was thrown into the public domain in 1963 after they murdered JFK, because what they wanted to do is silence people who didn't believe the magic bullet theory and didn't believe it was Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone shooter. So to close those people down and to ridicule them and to make them look and appear and sound stupid, they decided they would call them conspiracy theorists. And I watched a documentary about 3-4 years ago, and there was somebody who's been studying this for nearly 60 years, and he said on camera, it was one of these Sky documentaries, he said on camera, well, really all of the conspiracy theories are conspiracy facts. So don't waste your breath with the tinfoil hat. The numbers are here. If you want to go and do some name calling, go and speak to the NIH, go and speak to the FDA, go and speak to, here in the UK, the NHS. Go and speak to the CDC, go and speak to the White House, go and speak to Pfizer, go and speak to Moderna, go and speak to AstraZeneca. Some of those drugs have already been pulled off their market. Now they tell you because it's for your own good, they got a better product, but actually with the AstraZeneca, they only fessed up to that when they were up in court. And they had to actually confirm that their product causes blood clots. I was saying this in 2020. It's now the 1st of March. Happy 1st of the month. Pinch and a pump for the 1st of the month. No returns, as we used to say. Kicking a pinch, being so quick, no return. Today's the 1st of March, 2025. And this study was published in October 2024. Make that make sense. Anyway, I'm really going to leave it there now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Feel free to share this. I would love to have some, civil adult conversations about this, because I don't have children. So I'm not going to have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all the rest of it. I don't have skin in the game in that way, but I do care about the next generation. And I've got nieces and nephews. They're probably going to go forth and have children. I've got people that I work with. I've actually worked with people's children. I care about people. And this is why I was asking these questions in 2020, because my whole thing since October 2000, when I became a coach and a therapist, I wanted to help people and I wanted to leave the spaces I was in better than I found them. And so when I started seeing all of these anomalies, it's like, well, it would be remiss of me just to sit here and keep my mouth shut when I see that there is potential death and destruction coming, not just in the immediate term, but in the medium and the long term and even generationally. Because once you start messing with people in this way, you can pass that on to your offspring and they can pass it on to their offspring. I'm really going to stop talking now. Marilyn Devonish, the Neuro Success Coach, Rapid Transformation Specialist, and Futurist, over and out. Catch you later. Bye.